Welcome to Golf Industry Guru and the Gig Podcast, where we interview the best and brightest golf and hospitality leaders on the planet. On today's episode, you will learn some proven real-world solutions that'll help you and your team solve some of your biggest golf business challenges. So stick around for some tips, tools, and training to get you, your people, and your business powered on. Here's your host, James Cronk.
Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen, and Golf Industry Guru members. It is your host on the Gig Podcast, James Cronk, and we are here for a great discussion with just a fascinating individual that I came across and met a few months ago. Colin Weston is our guest today, and he is the host of the number 4 top-rated golf podcast in the world, ladies and gentlemen. And guess what? He does not actually work in the industry, which I think is fascinating. And so I want to, well, he does now, obviously. He's had a chance in his podcast to talk to, he just finished 100 podcasts. And if you go to his YouTube channel or go to his podcast channel, you will see the list, the quality list of individuals that he has had a chance to interview and talk to about the golf business. Unbelievable entrepreneurs, unbelievable disruptors, unbelievable leaders in the golf industry, including yours truly. And Colin has just got fascinating stories to tell. So, Colin, welcome to the Golf Industry Guru podcast.
James, thank you so much for inviting me on your show here. It's so good to see you and to hear that soothing, velvety voice of yours. I'm already relaxed.
You were kind enough to have me on your podcast a few weeks ago, and we learned that we'd probably crossed each other. We learned we're from the same neighborhood. We learned that we probably played the same golf courses. We maybe worked in some of the same restaurants when we were kids. And we learned that we both have a passion for innovation in the world of golf. So that's, our listeners, I think, can learn so much from some of the things that you have learned in your conversations over your last 100 podcasts and other things. But let's go back. Tell me a little bit about you and just how you have found your way into having the number 4 podcast in the world.
Sure. Well, thanks for the opportunity, James, to join all of your giggers. Are that what we're calling them? With the Gig Podcast? Are they all giggers?
We call them giggers. We call them all kinds of different things. But yes, giggers is good.
Love it. So if we rewind the tape here with me, I'll try to keep this as succinct as possible. But my background is in architecture. So going to architecture school, practicing architecture for over 20 years in the first part of my career, focusing the last 10 years or so on sport architecture. So working with large international firms with their offices based here in Vancouver, and myself working with high performance teams to design and build stadiums, venues for professional sports teams, college sports teams, and also Olympic venues and events and Pan Am Games, World Championship races. And the part that I really loved and started to get pretty darn good at was user experience, or UX, for sports, which was creating, over whether it was a 3-hour event or a 2-day event at an Olympic venue, what would that look like for the fans? What would the experience be like for the officials, for the athletes, for the coaches, for the security? All those overlays, all those experiential touch points across that journey before, during, and after the event, all those magical, heightened moments that we can help amplify. And I love that stuff. And so as entrepreneurs do, although I looked at myself not as an entrepreneur at that time, so this is like looking at the context of 2012, around this time, I was starting to become disengaged with kind of the formal profession of architecture, and didn't think, do I really want to spend the next 20, 25 years of my career doing this? And I think the answer was no, that I was then looking with this firm, and they were great people there and a great organization, but they really didn't have an innovation or entrepreneurial mindset. And I was trying very hard without realizing I was what we call an intrapreneur, an entrepreneur inside of an organization, which I encourage all of your listeners in the industry, if they're with whatever organization they're with, whether it's a golf club, or wherever they are in an existing industry, that you can be innovative and be an entrepreneur within an organization. You don't have to be a startup, but we can touch on that a little bit later. So that's where I was in my mindset. And I was getting either reluctance or kind of pushback on this. And I was getting frustrated. So I saw this aha moment with myself and my good friend, and who's now my business partner and co-founder of Reviver Sport Entertainment, which didn't exist at the time. We saw pain points in the golf industry. Myself, as you mentioned, I was not in the golf industry, even though I am now. And I only played a couple of rounds a year. I was shooting between 90 and 100, kind of stuck at that mediocre range. But I loved a lot of other sports, played a lot of sports growing up, competitive, always team sports at an elite level. But looked at golf, and it's like, well, at that time, golf was languishing, courses were closing, rounds played were down, and the industry leaders were kind of confused and not really knowing where to turn. So we looked at this as an opportunity, and not being in the golf industry, ignorance was our superpower. We weren't stuck in the golf industry mindset box because we're never in it in the first place, so we didn't have to extract ourselves from that. So as I do as a designer, is I look at inspiration from other trends, other industries, other things to see what resonates, to see what works, to see what attracts people. And that's what we did. So the first thing that we created over that year of 2012, 2013, we called Ripped Links. And Ripped Links was this short 3-hole, 3-player format that really took a cue from X Games, skateboarding, surfing, of how those events run. So really this was the best way to describe it, James, is Rip Links is a 16th hole at Phoenix Open on steroids all the time. It's temporary. You build this thing, drop it into the middle of a city, an urban park, Huntington Beach for 2 or 3 days, music, fun, food trucks, all the stuff, but it's still a high-level competition, both men and women competing against each other. And then you move on to another city after that, kind of like a Cirque du Soleil type of experience, more of a American Ninja Warrior meets Coachella Music Festival meets golf, is the best way to describe that. So for us, that's the thing that we created, and then the next piece of that journey was then how we validated that, and then that was the kind of the launch pad for us in our career. So before I kind of continue on with that, I'll kind of let you step in here, and we can kind of talk about this more, that how that led to the formation of the ModGolf Podcast later on.
Well, I thank you. And I saw some images and some pictures on your website of Reviver Sport Entertainment and the Rip Links and some of the other things, the ideas and concepts you guys had. I mean, it at the time, that must have been pretty radical. This is pre Top Golf. This is pre some of the other things that were happening. And you mentioned to me one time that you got to the mecca of the golf industry, the PGA Golf Show in Florida, and you know, when I can only imagine how Rip Links would have been a disruptor, so to speak, as you like to use that word, with regards to the golf industry. Tell me about that.
Yeah, happy to. So funny story here. So at that time, once again, not being in the industry, although I was connected here in Vancouver to some PGA professionals and people, another James
Lepp.
That you may know, good old James Lepp, who was on The Big Break years ago. So I knew him from that and connected with James. And James actually said to us, he loved Rip Links, but he really didn't have the capacity to help us out, even though he made some introductions at Golf Channel. But this is 2013 now. So this is still, this is early on. And one thing in entrepreneurship we've learned is successful entrepreneurship. Yes, you've got to have a great idea, great product, great team to deliver this, and the resources and partners. But it's also a lot about timing. And looking back, it was just too early. The market wasn't quite ready for this now. So even in 2013, James said to us, he goes, well, if you guys should go to the PGA merchandise show in January in Orlando. And we're like, what the heck is that? And of course, we researched that. And we decided then, we've spent the last year developing this, building what we call our minimum viable product, which as designers and architects and myself being good at 3D modeling and visualization, that I had my own little studio doing that as part of my work. That's what we created. So we created these images of the storyboards of what these events would look like, and they were hyper realistic. So people, once we put it on social media, we get a lot of feedback. That looks really dangerous. When did this happen? It looks amazing. And like, well, hold on, not quite yet. It hasn't happened, but it will. So we decided, you know what, we're going to take a flyer here and go to the PGA show to validate this, to start talking to people in the industry and listen and ask questions to find out, is there a market for this? And that's what we did. So Philip and I, then we already had the brand in place with Rip Links as far as the logos and all that. So we printed off some black Rip Links t-shirts and our trucker hats, and we descended upon the PGA show looking like a couple of old age over the hill skate punks. And both of us are pretty tall. I'm 6'1" and Philip's 6'3". So we stood out in the crowd of this sea of blue blazers and beige trousers. That is kind of the uniform for the PGA show. So we were certainly disrupting, and we basically snuck in the back door literally as wedding crashers, because we shouldn't have been there. And within day one, James, we heard that there was a panel discussion on growing the game. How do you connect with a younger audience? And not surprisingly, everybody on that panel was all a bunch of middle-aged white guys or older white guys, except for Annika Sorenstam. And she's, not 20 years old, so she's a little bit older also, which I thought was kind of funny that there's no young person actually representing to talk about what their needs and wants and desires and pain points are. So we went to this, and there was 1,000 people there, and we were a little bit late showing up. So we were standing in the back. And at the end of this, well, to let you know, first of all, who was on there, the main person, the big draw, why it was packed, was Donald Trump in 2014, was one of the people that was talking. And Trump did what Trump does. He's going on about, the golf industry's in amazing shape. Golf has never been better. My golf courses are amazing. Everybody loves them. Golf is is perfect. It's absolutely perfect. And
that's very good, Colin. You could go on the road with that. That's well done.
I haven't actually rolled that one out in a while there. So I'm sure your listeners, because you do have global reach, I'm sure I've just offended half your audience and the other half is laughing. So what are you going to do, right? You can't please everybody, right, James?
We'll take our chances.
There you go. So there's my effort at my Trump impersonation that I rolled out. But that's what he did. And I didn't know anybody else on the panel. This went on for the hour. And then at the end of it, it was Q&A time. And there's this guy walking around the audience with a microphone, and most people are asking the usual kind of softball questions and praising Trump and all the usual stuff. And this guy's walking towards me, and I see him, and we lock eyes. And of course, I'm taller than most people there, and I got this hat on, and he hands me the microphone, and I reach over all these other people and the C parts, and I grab the microphone, and I had this aha moment, everything we've worked on for the last year. And in 2 or 3 minutes, it just came out, just this kind of this out of body experience of, hey, I sound pretty good talking about this. And we just talked about the pain points and where the industry is and what we're creating with Rip Links and how we're connecting with a younger audience as that gateway. As you said, it was pre-Topgolf at that time. No one knew what Topgolf was. And we said, this is what we're doing. We've looked outside of our industry to pull all these awesome components of music, lifestyle, fashion, all these other things that people love, and taking the best elements of golf. And we're doing this because we love golf, not because we're trying to degrade golf. We're doing it because we love it. And we want to grow the game to create this gateway of this X Games, Red Bull action sport meets golf. And that was it. It was literally a mic drop moment. I was the last one to talk. All these people are then turning to me, taking pictures, wanting to know who the heck I was in Rip Links. And I wanted to get to Annika Sorenstam. Reason being is I saw with Rip Links, we had this 3-hole, 3-player format that was elegantly simple, that would take 25 minutes to play. And you add up your score at the end, and if you're tied, then it's sudden death, crank the music up, one shot close to the hole. Whoever wins moves to the next round. The other people are done, or they go to a qualifier, just like you do in action sports. But the great thing is since these are par 3 holes, that you don't have to be Bryson DeChambeau in order to hit the ball 300 and something yards, that women and men compete together, which we loved as far as having no separate women's division. So I wanted to talk to Annika, but her team and her handlers are already moving her off stage. And I'm thinking, well, okay, I guess that's it. And Philip is tapping me on the shoulder. He goes, there's that other guy over there that was talking. He's trying to get to you. And it was Mark King. And Mark King at that time is the president and CEO of TaylorMade Adidas Golf. Yes. And Mark is like pointing at me, I got to talk to that guy. Who are you? And so we go over to see him. we set up a 15-minute meeting for the next day, which turned into 2 hours.
Wow.
And he's like, can you come down to the Kingdom in Carlsbad? We're like, I don't even know what that is, but sure. He's like, well, we got to go to Europe for our big AGM. We'll be back. We'll be in touch. But at that time, though, trying to make the story too long, and I'm already extending this, but it's kind of an amazing story. After that validation, he's saying, well, we've got like this pot of money from this initiative that we created called Hack Golf, of this $5 million pot of money. We want to do this with you guys. This sounds great. We'll create a line of Rip Links clubs and you guys can get a royalty off of that. We're thinking, this sounds pretty good. Yeah, sign us up. So, but since the golf industry was down at that time, in the 2 or 3 weeks that we were then waiting on the sideline to wait for that call, TaylorMade, which is a publicly traded company, they got their last quarterly results, and of course they were down because equipment sales were down, and all of a sudden there wasn't the money and the availability. So anyway, without getting into this too much, this journey for all entrepreneurs out there, it's not a straight line. It is up and down and sideways and backwards. They apologized and said, we can't do this now. We love what you do. So we kind of sat on the sidelines for 6 months and waited for this to happen and didn't move forward with the other stuff, thinking this is going to happen. We didn't know at the time with entrepreneurship, right? Because we were early in the game. And that opportunity didn't happen. So what we did in the summer then is like, you know what? We just got to make stuff happen. So we're going to create an event in Vancouver. And that's what we ended up doing. We're going to make this small little event, make this thing happen, get these amazing men and women that had volunteered to play, to come in from the States. And, as at that time, most of them were social media influencers, and make it happen. And I pushed really hard with that for working 12-hour days for 3 months. And it wasn't big enough to make it happen. And it kept getting smaller and smaller. We couldn't get the sponsorship because it was so early in the game that didn't happen. But rather than looking at that as a failure, and at that time I really thought I had failed. It's like, oh God, we didn't make this thing happen. And I disappointed these people. And we didn't get our first event to really get the traction, the validator to show that we're doing this. Because the response we got back at the PGA show for everybody, this is awesome. When are you doing an event? How many events have you done when this is happening? And saying, well, sometime soon, somewhere, isn't really a great, inspiring way to have people lean in. So I knew we had to do an event. But what came out of that is one of the women that was going to be one of our participants. She said, do you know Topgolf? And do you know this guy named Eric Anderson, who is the chairman and CEO? And I said, no and no. And he's based in Seattle, so a 90-minute drive down the road from us here in Vancouver. So long story, getting shorter here, as even though that event didn't happen, it wasn't a failure. So to anybody looking at entrepreneurship and trying new things, look at everything as an experiment. If it doesn't work, try something else, take the best ingredients from it, rather than attaching stigma that you failed and I can't try again. So out of that, we got introduced to Topgolf, and they then wanted to acquire us. They wanted to invest in us. And there was all these valuations of millions of dollars thrown around. We thought, hey, this is the way this entrepreneurship thing works, right? It's not knowing. It's like, well, we got to get this thing in market. It was too early for them. We did this dance for about 6 or 8 months with them. The deal didn't go through. But out of that, since they loved what we're doing so much, and Eric Anderson, even though we were quite disappointed and downright mad that a deal wasn't put forward, we still maintained a great relationship with him. And out of that, we created the Innovation Group in 2016 for Topgolf. And all the ingredients of Rip Links, the best things we had, and we still owned all that. So it isn't like we handed that over to them and lost the opportunity. So then we worked with them at that 30,000 foot level of envisioning what new opportunities could be. And I want to encourage all of your listeners out there in the golf industry of looking at, if they're at a course or whatever they do in the industry, of looking at other opportunities. And that's what we did with them. So we did that big kind of blue sky, what could be. So half a dozen different opportunities, distilled that down into then creating a mobile activation in stadium version of Topgolf, which they called Topgolf Crush. And now I believe they call it Topgolf Live. So we designed that, and then the kind of the physical infrastructure of that and the experience, and then handed that over to them. So it also validated what we were doing, rather than just the idea of Rip Links. And that was really our way to move forward and get even more connected to the golf industry. And then that then led to the creation of the ModGolf Podcast, which I'm happy to talk about next.
That's fascinating. My goodness, we could do a whole session, I think, talking. I would love to hear what was being discussed at the Innovation Group Roundtable when you were, talking about the elements, because I think you nailed a couple things there, Colin, and I just want to comment on it. And, I tell the story that I remember when I was down in Phoenix one year at a Troon property, and I went to the driving range and I heard music on the driving range, and people were freaking out. Golfers were like, "Who's got a radio on? Turn down that." This is before golf carts with Bluetooth and things like that. I mean,
right.
They had the rock speakers. They looked like rocks, and they were placed around and we were just, and everyone's so radical. It's like when you stop wearing long socks and you start wearing short socks. I mean, I think every golf operator needs to take a moment once a year and think back about these milestones and these innovations and where the industry is today versus where it's come from and where it was, and how radical it seemed back then that we had a speaker on the driving range, and how now, if you don't have a speaker in your cart, you're behind the scenes. Like if you're not playing music on the golf course, then you're limiting your customer experience, right? And so, what used to be taboo is now completely acceptable, embraced in the game of golf. And when you talk about entrepreneurship and you talk about trying things, they're not always all going to stick. You got to try 3 or 4 things to make your restaurant better, to make your service better, to make your golf shop better. And then, they don't always work. Sometimes they, as you said, they fail, but sometimes they morph into something else. And so, tell me how, you've been around for a while now, your ModGolf podcast, and I'm a rookie at it. So, a few years ago, a podcast, I was like, well, what exactly is a podcast? So you've been at it for a while. What led you then to get into to the interviewing people in the business?
Yeah. So great question. So this is summer of 2016. This is at the time when the dance with Topgolf was for the acquisition kind of fell apart. So the rock rolled back to the bottom of the mountain again for the second time. And it's like, okay, what do we do? Do we give our entrepreneurship shot a second time? Is that it? Should I go back to become, a traditional architect? It's like, that was my opportunity and just move on. Or do we try to do something else? And you touched on, it's like, do you morph it into something else and look at that? So one thing we did, because we are Reviver Sport Entertainment, not Reviver Golf Entertainment, that we're also looking at other sports, whether it's technology-led, community building, all these things, experiences. How do you connect with a new audience, grow that sport for recreational users, for fans, for brands? And that's what we do. How do you actually grow that particular sport? So the other ones that we were looking at heavily and had been looking at the technology of artificial wave generation for a couple of years, and Philip being Aussie and growing up surfing since he was little, he was the one that really led the charge on that. So the other thing that we then created in that summer there, because I needed to step back from golf, to be honest, we needed a little bit of a break, is developing really the Topgolf of surf parks. So everything we had learned from Topgolf so far and the business model and how everything worked there, we applied that to surf parks. And without getting into that too much, we created that narrative, just like we did with Rip Links, around a surf park in Vancouver. And the media attention we had, the way we positioned that, it just went kaboom. And then we met all these other partners. So spent some time doing that, but also at the same time, I then got interested in podcasting, that I had other friends that were in podcasting and more in the business space, that I saw that they were doing it for the right reasons. That was to build community, establish thought leadership in the space, and really cultivate a network in not in the positive sense, right? Building what we call your social capital, right? Earning that trust, and then getting access to awesome human beings like yourself that I would have never known, James, without the ModGolf podcast, and then connecting with them And that has changed my life. So I looked at this. And so in that summer, I listened to a lot of podcasts, but even though I'm a sports guy, I don't listen to any sports podcasts at all. So I just did the entrepreneurial thing because I listened to, the future of work and innovation type podcasts and storytelling. Love the storytelling piece and podcasting and Moth Radio Hour and TED Talks and those type of things that I did as a curious entrepreneur does. That on iTunes at the time, I just did on search. I put in sports, and of course, thousands of podcasts pop up, and I put in golf, and hundreds of podcasts pop up. And then I put in innovation golf, entrepreneurship golf, future golf, and there was zero, nothing. No one was having these conversations. And I looked at this, and being now 3 years into this entrepreneurial journey and now getting connected with these people, I'm thinking, well, I know some of these amazing entrepreneurs that I've been introduced to and people in the industry. It's like someone should tell those stories. And I thought maybe I should tell those stories, and looked at it, as you touched on, as an experiment as well. Why don't I do a season? I'll do 12 episodes, and maybe there's only 12 stories out there. And so I reached out to people, whether it was Ron Powers, a good friend of mine with Topgolf, and he leads up Topgolf Swing Suites now. I reached out to Ron and some other people I knew. I said, okay, here's the thing. I'm thinking about doing this podcast. I'm a zero. I'm nobody in the media space. I may really suck at this. We may get 0 downloads. No, wait, 2 downloads, because you and I will both listen to our own podcast, right? So 2 downloads, maybe more. Would you be a guest on my podcast? And every time they said, Colin, love what you're doing. We're friends. Like, absolutely. They took the leap of faith. So I already had 4 people lined up, and I just got going. So rather than waiting to make it perfect, because there is no perfect in entrepreneurship, rather than demanding certainty, which sadly a lot of people do, and we're kind of bred that way, especially through school, I just looked for clarity. Every step, every question that I asked, every conversation I had. So I looked at this, James, as like, well, maybe I'll do 12 episodes. Maybe I suck at this. Maybe no one listens. Maybe there's only 12 stories. Maybe all the above. And I started getting introduced to more and more people. And then with the ModGolf Podcast, after season 1 and then taking a bit of a break, I started to realize it was more than just these technology-led products and responses that people were having to move the industry forward, which the industry, as we know, has been a laggard on the innovation side, which for a long time, which leads to great opportunity, which a lot of people are harnessing, and you and I are 2 of those people, and your listeners are also those people. So it was really interesting that I started to get introduced to people that were more on the community building side, to make the game more diverse, to make it more equitable, to make it more welcoming. From Steve Mona with World Golf Foundation and We Are Golf, and Steve then opened up the world to me of all these other introductions, and that's where it took off. And now 100 episodes in, we just celebrated last week, which we did celebrate that small win. I just went and got a cake, put some candles on it, and put that out there in a little video on social media, so you can see that on all the ModGolf Podcast social media channels. And we're still going, and we're just getting started, and it's super excited, and happy to tell you about some of the experiences with some of the guests that we've had, if you'd like to hear that.
Well, I do, Colin, and once again, I want to take a moment and encourage our gig members to go to your ModGolf Podcast website and to look at the quality and the differences of the individuals. You've had so many interesting individuals that are doing all kinds of amazing things. And what I find very fascinating about it, and I am in the industry, like my inbox is filled every day with the magazines and the newsletters from all over the world and all the stuff that's going on. And yet I still come across people that you've interviewed that have got an entire industry business going on in the golf space that I haven't seen or that I haven't heard about. And that's one of the things that fascinates me, is that there are some, certainly there's the Steve Mones of the world, and there's others that I recognize and I've heard about, and their businesses I've heard about. But you've really discovered and unearthed some interesting people. So here's one of the things I would love you to share with our audience. Because when you go through that list, there's all kinds of messages that you can apply to your business, right? And one of the things, look, the reality is that you're an entrepreneur, and whether we remind ourselves or not every day, as golf course owners and operators, we are an entrepreneur. We are running an entrepreneurial business in an entrepreneurial industry. There is no system. There is no degree required. There is no, process. You are an entrepreneur. You just happen to be running a golf club, or a golf club and a restaurant, or a golf club and a restaurant and a banquet space and tennis courts, whatever it might be. So tell me about some of the guests you've had, if you don't mind. What some of your favorites, and also, some of the favorite lessons that you've kind of, because I would think, Colin, for you, in the sense that you were around the golf industry, you knew the golf industry from a customer standpoint, you knew the golf industry from a reviver and from a entertainment standpoint, but you don't know the golf industry from showing up in the morning and cutting grass and what it takes to have your food cost at 32%. So,
exactly.
So what are some of the things that you've learned from your guests that have been interesting to you, or have been inspirational to you, or whatever it might be?
Yeah, well, gosh, there's such a kind of a rich and diverse spectrum of conversations that I've had with people. And some of them, as you mentioned, you've never heard of. They may still be in that ideation stage as an early entrepreneur, like as a startup. Some of them are more established.
How about the guy you had the other day with a 3D printer, the 3D printed putter?
Absolutely. And that was Cobra Puma Golf. So that was Mike Yagley, who is the VP of Innovation in Artificial Intelligence, and myself as an entrepreneur, kind of showing some grit and some hustle through LinkedIn. And I love LinkedIn now. LinkedIn, I know a couple of years ago, was a bit of a joke for everybody. But I find that the most engaging place to have authentic conversations and connect with people. And it's by giving back. And before we get into some of the episodes here, that's the key. I want to encourage all people out there that they're considering entrepreneurship on their own with a startup of something in the golf industry or within the organization they already have, is have conversations with people and give back, offer to help first. It's such a fundamental component kind of built into my DNA now that I've learned with one of the other hats that I wear, and that is as the founder and community leader of Startup Vancouver, which is one of over 40 chapters of Startup Canada across the country that is the voice of the over 4 million entrepreneurs we have here. And I've learned that aspect. It's about giving first, give first, and give back first, rather than coming in hot and saying, I need this, and showing that hustle and cold calling and smiling and dialing. You know what? I'm sure your inbox is filled, James, every day with those type of requests. I'm doing this great thing, blah, 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 rather than what do you need? What are your biggest struggles? What are your biggest needs? And having those conversations. And that's how you connect with people. And you have to be patient with that. And that's one thing that I've learned, and how I've managed to meet a lot of these people. People will ask, I think episode 3 that I had Keith Pelly, who had just got on, just started within the 6 months or so as the CEO of the European Tour. And people are like, how did you get connected to him? It's because of people that I knew before that I had worked with and had connected with and offered value to and built relationships with, that I just then asked. It's like, hey, can you connect me with Keith? I'd love having him on. And then that happened over time. And quite often that's what has happened, that I've offered to help first. And then, as we talked about with the podcast, executing at a high level of what we do, of providing value. It's all about value, right? It's not about your cost, even though that's kind of a piece of the component of your pricing with what you do in the industry for what you offer in golf. But it is, what is the value that you offer your customers, for your users, right? What new value can you create? What new benefits can you create that resolve pain points and jobs to be done by your golfers, by your agronomist, by your, head groundskeeper, whoever that could be. So for me, that was the key for that. So all the episodes to look at here, I'll take a bit of I've got 3 of them that are all kind of different from each other. And one of them, that should resonate with the industry. And that's just, how do you kind of create new value with the assets that you have? And this comes with, I think, one of my favorite episodes, besides the one I had with this guy named James Cronk. That one was pretty amazing too, but I'll kind of leave that one on the sideline for now. And the most downloaded episode we've ever had by more than a factor of 2, James, is by the only person that's never even swung a golf club before. that I've talked to, of the over 100 people I've talked to. And that is Professor Rene Morbon, who is the co-author of Blue Ocean Strategy, a business methodology that's been New York Times bestseller
of course,
many, many times over. And I've really embraced Blue Ocean Strategy, and I'm now a workshop practitioner of this, and I do that both in and outside the golf industry. And the kind of the fundamental premise of Blue Ocean Strategy is this metaphor of the open, wide blue ocean with uncontested market space to create whatever you want, rather than fighting over the scraps and kind of that bloody red ocean of competition, of trying to take market share from your competitors. So that's what you do. So you're making the competition irrelevant, because it's not about disrupting. You're creating new value. And the great example there outside of the golf industry is Cirque du Soleil as compared to traditional Barnum and Bailey circus, without getting involved too much. What they did, they didn't try to appeal to families with little kids that the only money you're making is off of this little bit you make off of tickets and selling sodas and candy and popcorn. Much more sophisticated, taking elements from other industries, from Broadway shows, from music, entertainment, as we know, getting rid of the things that are expensive from animals and things that don't necessarily work, and taking those best elements, reducing everything else, eliminating some things, amplifying the things that work, and then adding and creating new value.
Yeah,
so
that's excellent.
The great example, and Topgolf is the poster child for a Blue Ocean strategy in the golf industry of what they've done. They're not competing against the 15,000 North American golf courses out there. They're creating all this other value that other golf courses can't create. So my episode with Professor Rene Morbon was amazing. And it's all about also the power of partnerships that I want to encourage all of your listeners within organizations or on their own there. There's this old adage in entrepreneurship that if you want to go fast, you go alone, but if you want to go far, you go together. So the power of partnerships and finding people that complement what you're doing, putting yourself out there, and that's how you can really propel yourself forward. And with someone like Blue Ocean Strategy, I then wrote a blog post that then they posted on the Blue Ocean Strategy site with their hundreds and hundreds of thousands of, if not in the millions, of people that they're connected to. So that just amplified my ability to partner and get that signal strength up, rather than me sitting in the corner and just posting the blog post on the ModGolf Podcast website, which, sure, a couple hundred people, maybe 1,000 or so would get it. So I've learned that too. The power of partnerships, I encourage everyone. That's so important. So that episode was amazing. So the next one that spins off into then how is that applied was the conversation I had with Steve Rosen, who works with Troon, who also with Indian Wells Golf Course, golf resort, the 36 holes in Palm Springs. So they created Shots in the Night. So what they did, perfect Blue Ocean Strategy example, so out there for all of your people in the industry, is they were then trying to get more people on the golf course. They weren't going to build another 18 holes. They weren't going to try to get people off in 7 minutes rather than 9 minutes to increase capacity. They took more of this Uber or Airbnb approach of what existing assets that we have that are underutilized, that are only being used 50% of the time, 20% of the time. And they looked at their driving range and they looked at their putting greens. And at night, of course, they're used 0% of the time. So that's when they created, using the technology from a good friend of mine, Dave Schultz, who is the CEO and founder of NextLink. So with their technology, with the putting that they have, that then they created Shots in the Night. So all of a sudden they're creating new value, unlocking new customer markets, whether it's new golfers, people that have refused to ever golf before for all the barriers and pain points that we all know that existed forever in the golf industry, languished or lapsed golfers that can't play 18 holes anymore for whatever reason, for time or maybe physical inability to do that, and attracting them and bringing in food trucks and then having the music. So there's some Topgolf elements there. So they're not, once again, not creating something from zero. I encourage all people out there that don't start with a blank piece of paper and go, I got to create something that's so uniquely new. Take other elements of things that work and include those in part of the recipe of what you're creating. That's what they did with Shots in the Night. So that's a great example of how you can create more value, another revenue stream of how you can take your existing infrastructure and assets and then leverage that to attract new customers. And they've done a great job with that with Shots in the Night.
Fantastic. And one more, final one.
One more. The other one I'm going to mention is, which is something that I'm so passionate about now, is how do you, I don't use the grow the game term, is how does the game evolve? How does it transform into something that then appeals to everyone, to make everyone welcome and inviting, to make it equitable? And these conversations I've had with people that are growing the game, with Black golfers, with Latino golfers, with LGBTQ golfers, with
yes.
all these other groups, and women golfers also, whether it's a good friend of mine now, Elisa Gaudet, with Women's Golf Day that's going to be happening on June 1st again this year in 2021. And so it's all of those conversations. And Sandy Cross, who now is, her title now is the Chief People Officer with the PGA of America, and meeting with her and having her on the podcast and understanding that grassroots level of all these people, all these organizations that are growing the game, and technology enables that, but really has nothing to do with it. It is about making the game inviting and welcoming for all of these other disenfranchised and underrepresented communities over time. And so the one episode I want to talk about that really encapsulates that. Of the 100 episodes I've done about half a dozen or so, none now during the last year over COVID times, unfortunately. But getting out there in the field for these events, whether it's live from the PGA merchandise show now, which I'm no longer sneaking in the back door, that they're actually paying me to be there, with the irony is not lost on me, whether I'm speaking at as part of their educational series on innovation and entrepreneurship in golf. But also whether it's going to Las Vegas a couple of years ago to cover the major series of putting. But the one that really resonates with me, James, is a couple of years ago, I got invited to go down to Seattle, where the USA Games Special Olympics were taking place, and they had a golf event, and all of their golf athletes, most of them had Down syndrome at different varying degrees across the spectrum. And it was for me, it was, I wouldn't go as far as life-changing, but it certainly altered my trajectory, and seeing the lens through these individuals and their families and the support there of this pure, unfiltered love and energy and kindness that was exuded through there, and how much they loved the game and the way they played it, depending on their capabilities. It was still golf, right? And that really kind of changed my way of approaching a lot of the things that I do. It's just such an inflection point for me, as far as that diversity and inclusion piece that is now just ingrained in what I do, beyond the entrepreneurship storytelling that we have, beyond the innovation side, all the technology pieces that we do. You talked about the Cobra Puma golf piece there, and myself being a design guy and being in the architectural world, that when I heard about this 3D printed putter, is like, I've got to get them on the show and talk to them. And that was an amazing episode also. So we cover a lot of different topics on the ModGolf podcast, but that I tell people that even if they're not into golf at all, or maybe they're really into golf, like all of your listeners, it is about entrepreneurship. It's about storytelling. It's about personal journeys. But golf happens to be that beautiful golden thread that kind of weaves through the narrative of that 30, 40-minute conversation that brings it all together.
Well, that's awesome, Colin. Thank you so much. And I would say that I should correct myself, because you are fully in the golf business. There's no doubt about it. You have become just a incredibly unique storyteller, really, interviewer, podcast host. But the stories and the examples and the things you've just described even now, those are great examples for owners and operators and managers of golf courses to listen to learn from, to see what they can do to adapt what's happening out there to their little piece in their business. So thank you so much for being on Golf Industry Guru today. I know people can find you on your ModGolf Podcast YouTube channel, on your ModGolf Podcast website, right? Download your wherever people get their podcast, listen to, all that stuff.
Absolutely. So the easiest way to find us is www.mod.golf, and that will take you to our home show page. there. As you mentioned, we also have the ModGolf YouTube channel, so we're up and running there now. We also have fun giveaways. I do product reviews from the average golfer. I'm now a 15 handicapper, hopefully getting that down, so I'm certainly not a professional. We'll never have my name on a bag. I will never go there, so nor should I. So yes, they can find us there through social media with ModGolf Podcast. So we're very active between Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and also on LinkedIn with our page there. And also out there, the lessons learned, as you talked about, as far as adapting everything we learned with Rip Links, even though that opportunity hasn't gone away, we're talking to other partners. And that's the great thing with these relationships that I've built, including yourself. I have over 100 mentors, 100 ambassadors, and quite often dozens of new lifelong friends that I've met through the relationships and the social capital that I built. So coming up for us also is, if you want to call it, Rip Links version 2.0 that we've been developing. And the technology of that is, how do you learn? How do you adapt? And this has definitely resonated with a lot of people in the industry. And that is, we're creating the Top Golf of putting. Rather than Top Golf hitting bays, we're coming up with putting pods called Aces Gameplay Golf. So get ready to see that launched in market in 2022 once we can all gather together. So we're certainly developing that. If anyone wants to learn more about that, they can reach out and connect with me. Happy to talk about how we can look at other partnerships to propel that forward too, with Aces Gameplay Golf, which we're super excited about, to get that in the fan experience zones at PGA and LPGA events in the future too.
Always entrepreneurial. I love it. That's fantastic. Colin, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Gig listeners, and we'll see you on the inside.
Thanks for listening to the Gig Podcast. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and mostly that you learned a few things that will help you improve your business. Join us next time as we continue to bring you the best and brightest golf and hospitality leaders on the planet. Thanks for listening.